Welcome to Telegeography Explains the Internet, the show that explores the business behind all of the ways humans stay connected around the world. I'm your host, Greg Bryan, and my guest today is Jamie Pugh, who's CTO at Globalgig. Jamie joined me to talk about enterprise network orchestration in this era of an increasingly complex WAN. We get into some of the difficulties of monitoring and managing the myriad elements of the modern WAN that can impact application performance, and how Jamie saw the need for an orchestrator of orchestrators, as we end up calling it in the show. We talk some about AI ML and how it can be employed in corporate network automation. And I think this is going to pair well with our last episode, where we took a deep dive into that topic with getting AI to manage networks from Michael Winston at Fiserv. We also talk about Globalgig's platform, Orchestra Insights, and some of the use cases for those services. I thought these two episodes go very well together in an accidental mini-series of sorts to help start to solidify how automation and AI are actually playing out in the modern enterprise WAN. Okay, enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Well, thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, excellent. My pleasure. I always start here, Jamie, but it's particularly useful to get just your view. I've done a little intro here, but your view on your background, how you came to be CTO at Globalgig, and maybe even just a little bit on what you do at Globalgig.
Okay, great. Yeah. Let's start back in the early 90s. I fell in love with networking. I was working for Motorola as a process engineer, and I had a Silicon graphics workstation and a Mac Color Classic.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
I was able to take my CAD diagrams and I was able to move them, from one computer to the other.
Yeah.
And then I had on the Mac Color, I remember the Netscape browser that would spin and spin up, and I could get on the web and started playing around on bulletin boards and internet relay chat, and just really, really fell in love with networking. So started following the network guys around, and said, what is this token ring thing, and then they started a project there to convert the network from token ring to Ethernet, with hubs at the time. And I was just fascinated. So followed them around. Eventually I started working with those guys and networking, and said, forget the process engineering and so just kind of migrated my skills over to the networking side.
It's very, very nerdy
From
that
point,
we start out with IRC mentions here, right? So, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, for sure. So at that point, I moved back to Texas. So I was in Florida when all that was going on. I moved back to Texas, and my friend was starting up an ISP, internet service provider, that was focused on dial-up networking, right? So, we installed some networking gear, moved into ISDN, started to get some business customers, sold that business, and, I kind of got into, I liked the idea of being my own boss. So started several small companies. They were, successful enough to sell each one of them, and got, I was very fortunate there to be able to do that. One of these companies was actually in Austin, Texas. We built a data center and started my first managed services provider business, where we were managing networks for the CEO of Globalgig, now CEO of Globalgig. He had a company called One Source Networks.
I remember them well. Yeah.
So he acquired my company because we were taking we were managing a lot of his customers, and he didn't like writing us a big check, so he acquired us. And at that point, we realized we were stronger together. I managed his engineering team, and we sold that business to a telecom to GTT Networks, a huge telecom here now, and I decided at that point, this telecom thing, I'm not sure about it. Do I really want to do this? I got a 2-year-old kid. I want to do something else. I decided we bought an RV with some of the money, the exit money that we got from the deal. I took a package from GTT instead of staying on.
Right.
And, I as I was driving, GTT calls me and says, "Hey, there's a subset of business there that we don't really know how to manage it. It's not really in our standard, our network standard." So they started paying me monthly to manage this customer base. So I hired 3 or 4 people right off the bat while I'm on my journey in the RV touring North America. And within a year, we grew to 10 people and we started a SD-WAN consultancy. So we were doing we were building a lot of WAN networks and getting some really good business because it was new. It was at that slope of enlightenment. Everybody wanted some SD-WAN. So Ernest called me up, said, "Hey, I need some help. We're selling networks again, and why don't you meet me for some barbecue?" And we got together and said, "Come over, be the CTO of Globalgig." So he acquired my company, and once again, so the second time I was acquired by Ernest. And this time we had a much stronger vision. We wanted to transform telecom in the MSP space. We felt that there was a lot of opportunity there, and that's where we're headed. So here at Globalgig, I wear a lot of hats. I work with the software side of the business. I work with the product side of the business, the marketing side, and the operations team. I've got a lot of history in operations, so I provide quite a bit of value there, just helping them with network standards and process and things of that nature. So wear a lot of hats, but not your. I don't have a bunch of headcount as a CTO here. I'm not your typical CTO. Just kind of wearing those hats and just driving innovation here at Globalgig.
But presumably you sold the RV and you're no longer digital nomading for now. So
actually, I upgraded the RV.
Nice. All right.
And I did get a Starlink. So tie that into a PEP link with multiple SIMs so that I have connectivity to T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T and Starlink. So I have a really smooth experience when I am nomading. People can't really tell. I just change the background and they don't know. So
there's a lesson for enterprises there, the tertiary links with, all right. So,
yes.
Yeah. Excellent.
For sure.
And utilizing all the underlay possibilities. I love it. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, it's what we do as a business. So, it also comes at a very low cost to me. So I have a very nice setup.
Excellent. Yeah. That's kind of the dream, right? All right. So Jamie, this is Telegeography Explains the Internet. We always like to make sure that anybody across the industry, or even sometimes people who are only sort of adjacent to it, can understand what we're talking about, work through it with us. So I thought we'd start the episode out with just your sort of basic definition of network orchestration. What does that mean to you at Globalgig?
Yeah. So simply put, network orchestration is ultimately a process. It's the process of commanding, controlling, managing all the different network functions which are deployed across that enterprise network, right? So that's probably the simplest definition I could say.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and I think the context of where that sort of comes in with what we're going to talk about today, to back up for folks, comes from this world that you were sort of talking about with your startups and all that with SD-WAN comes along, the enterprise or corporate wide area network goes through a lot of changes over the past decade or so, right? So where folks have been really reliant on MPLS as the sort of primary mode of connectivity on private networks of some kind, move to this complex environment of introducing internet, or as you mentioned, like Starlink, 5G, all kinds of alternative underlay technologies, and just really increasing the complexity. There's lots of reasons why these changes happen that are beneficial, of course, right? But how do you see that from a sort of network management perspective of keeping up with all of these changes that have happened to the sort of physical infrastructure of the enterprise network?
Yeah, it's all those things that you mentioned, right? The transformation of the enterprise WAN to support these business critical applications, whether they're hosted in data centers, CSPs, cloud service providers, and in the cloud offerings, the SaaS providers. These applications, Microsoft 365, ServiceNow, CRM, Salesforce, right? Oracle ERP systems. They're
Mm-hmm.
always on applications now. The productivity comes to a halt when they're down. So that transformation has required the network to step up, right? Now there's, you can't just get by with an MPLS network, right? Because you need a second MPLS network and you need some internet access out and you need some security to get to those applications that are out in the cloud. So we went from a very simple network architecture where we had a router at the site, and on the inside you had a switch, and then you had, connected devices, and they all went back to the data center. If they needed to get out to the internet from the data center, they went out from there. And now we have, so many components, right? Every site that we have has, multiple routers, SD-WAN routers. You have multiple switches to be able to split those underlay circuits, multiple circuits. So the underlay circuits, you've got 2 or 3 circuits there. All of these have different management platforms. So they all have their SDN orchestrated, platforms where they look at their components, and that's what you have. But now we have this sprawl of network orchestrators out there, right? So you've got, your SD-WAN orchestrator, your switch orchestrator, your security platform, whether that's local firewalls or if it's in the cloud, SSEs. Your secure service edge policies. You've got all these different portals, and then you got to go and you got to manage the underlay telecoms as well through their portals. And what we found is that presented a challenge. The challenge was, how do I actually unify or see all of this holistically so that I can properly track the events and incidents that are being created and put them into a single holistic view of the network. I kind of stumble on the words because it's so much. There's so much going on there, right? There's, I've got a site that I just mentioned that has, a circuit that goes down. Well, that circuit that goes down may demonstrate that one of the switches goes down. That may also bring one of the SD-WAN appliances down, right? Depending on how it's architected. And in that world, if I go into each of those different portals, they're all going to show me that something is down. And when I am looking at it from a traditional monitoring platform, I'm going to get 3 tickets, right? I'm going to get 3 tickets that are all priority 1. They're all, super severe. And my network operations center or, my engineering team, if I'm an enterprise, is going to suffer because everything's a priority 1. Everything's hair on fire. Right. So we needed something that could look at it holistically. So our idea was to, why don't we just talk to all of these devices directly over the WAN and over the public internet, wherever available, but also let's talk to the orchestrators. And let's holistically, make decisions based on what these events they're all saying. And then let's use logic, it started with manual logic. So we created the conditions that said that, hey, if I see a circuit go down, it's the root cause of the switch going down and the SD-WAN appliance. So I have 1 ticket. It's going to the service provider for the telecom underlay. And I know that my network's still up. I've already checked power because other devices are up in the network. And so that's the logic that we had built manually. Enter AI, and I think we're going to go down some conversation around AI. I hope I'm not stepping too in advance.
No, not at all. That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. But enter AI, we have now the ability to actually drive that conversation or drive that workflow. So you have targeted workflows that say, hey, I see a circuit's down. That's probably going to create some impact. Let me go log into those devices to find out what kind of impact. Let me enrich the ticket. Let me audit what I'm doing into the ticket. So, and then get the ticket directly to the people that can actually, resolve the issue. And then let me properly identify the severity of the impact to the entire site. So, if you have 2 circuits or 3 circuits and you have a highly available SD-WAN network, and one of your circuits goes down, it's not a priority 1. You built that resiliency there for a reason.
That's the point.
It's a P2. It's a P2, right? It's a priority 2 or a priority 3. And, if you can treat that ticket that way and then build some workflows that automatically do the triage to go find out like, hey, you know what? I got a workflow that AI can drive and say, let me log into the device, the CPE that's terminating that circuit. Can I ping the gateway? I can't. Okay, let me enrich the ticket with that. Can I see the ARP resolution of the provider edge router? I can't. Okay, let me enrich the ticket with that. Now that I've enriched the ticket with that, I know that the circuit layer 1, layer 2, there's an issue with the circuit provider, the underlay. So I'm going to open that ticket directly with the carrier. I don't even have to, nobody on my team has to get involved. They can actually, the ticket has all the information the carrier needs to troubleshoot it. When it resolves, the circuit comes back up, the ticket auto closes with carrier resolve the trouble. And, we became more efficient. We reduced the mean time to repair. The customer's happy. Globalgig's happy. So that's really the story.
So really, the essence is you're orchestrating the orchestrators, right? So orchestration
right.
had been sort of focused on particular elements within the network, but we needed it's a granularity problem, right? It's scale. Where telegeography, we think about scale all the time. It's about pulling back to a far enough scale, but still having the visibility at different levels of granularity to be able to get in there and actually solve the problem. I want to clarify one thing, Jamie, on sort of this setup that you're talking about. That Globalgig doesn't own or operate any network, right? So what you're doing is sort of between the service provider and the enterprise, right? Of understanding these problems and then solving them with the underlying service provider.
That's correct. Yeah, Globalgig is not a large fiber operator. We don't have investments in that fiber. What we do is have relationships with all the carriers globally so that we can interface with them from our network operations center, and we can monitor them all, whether it's via directly, pinging them over the internet, or in some of the major carriers, we can do API integrations to be able to see if, what the status is of the service and what they're seeing on their end. So those are the types of enrichments that we bring in.
And so from a sort of customer standpoint, the enterprise is your customer. They're sitting there with your portal. They can see these things, and then there's another side that you have to be sort of working on these automation and orchestration features with the service providers via these APIs you're talking about and that sort of thing.
Yes, that's it.
All right, cool. All right, that all makes sense. That's always good to make sure everybody's on the same page. So you did allude that we were going to get into this and what AI can actually do for networks. I think that just in the general sort of zeitgeist, AI has become a big conversation piece for the whole public in the last couple of years in a way that lots of us who are nerdy have been thinking about it for a long time. But I want to laser beam a little bit more on that, just to go through the process of you sort of described the steps that an engineer might take when you see a fault of a certain priority, and okay, we're going to ping this, then we're going to see if it's not that, we're going to ping this, and we're going to see which service provider or which element, where the failure is. How is AI now and in the near future sort of taking that off the hands of the engineers, and what do engineers need to do to make that happen, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to documenting what you're actually doing, documenting the steps that you're doing, and making sure that your knowledge base articles are right and your tickets are you're auditing the steps that you took, because AI is only as good as it's been trained, right? So that's really what we're doing at this point is like, how do we feed that language model, with the steps that we've done to actually resolve issues. So any tickets that are getting to you that AI hasn't resolved, make sure that you're putting in all those steps. You're documenting your processes, because the language model will learn that. It'll start to see similar use cases. When an incident is raised, it'll say, "Hey, I've seen this before." So only if you've documented it, though. If you haven't documented, because the AI that we're doing, it's not just tying into the monitoring platform, it's also tying into your KB system. So whatever you're writing your knowledge base articles in, it's tying in with your ITSM or your service desk tool, the CMDB. So it knows what the estate looks like from, at that location. So it can make some inference to that. So all of this stuff just has to be, well documented. Your CMDB has to be very accurate. And then you can actually, efficiently train your and get the most out of AI. So it's important.
Right. And where do you see us in general, maybe particularly at Globalgig, in that development now? Like, in other words, how trained are these AIs to actually sort of deal with these problems without direct human intervention yet?
Yeah, and because we've been monitoring and managing networks for so long, we were able to cheat the system a little bit, and
Hmm.
because I built a lot of this logic manually, so it was
Right.
able to feed off of logic that I had built. So taking that logic and saying, hey, let's move away from this, thousands of code of logic that we created manually, and move that into a state where the machine is actually making those decisions instead of actually reading my hard code. So I'd say that we're probably ahead of the game because of that. But there's so far to go. I mean, we're just now at the precipice of the of what we can actually do with AI. That
Yeah.
we're looking at it now. We're looking at it now as, like, I mean, we've been looking at this from network centric, but now you have so much more, right? You've got digital experience monitoring, right? So a lot of these platforms, these SD-WAN platforms or network OEMs, have come out with things like ADEM from Palo Alto and Thousand Eyes from Cisco, which can actually watch applications move across your WAN, watch them go out to SaaS providers if there's integrations there, and give you a end user's experience all the way to the application, whether it's something you host or out in the SaaS cloud world. And now we can take that data in and further train the ML, right, and
Hmm.
enrich the ticketing based on user experience, and then we have the security world, right? You've got customer. Now we have security and security policy. So if we start to see some issues related to the network that might involve that SSE, so that secure service edge, cloud firewall, we can bring that into the story, and we can say, hey, I've seen this before. I've seen where the tunnel from the branch, drops because one of the nodes goes down at the SSE, and it creates this impact. So let's enrich the ticket with that, and let's pause and wait the 5 minutes for that other node to pick up, see if it resolves itself, and then just it's just much smarter way to do
Hmm.
things. So I
Hmm.
can ramble on for hours because I'm so
No,
excited about it,
no, no,
but yeah,
no.
there's just
Likewise,
so
yeah.
much potential there.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, it's what everyone has to sort of grok about the AI, really, in any scenario, but certainly in this case, is how iterative that process is. Just like you say, that every time there is an issue, and then you review that, and then it's learning a little bit, right? And I think,
Hmm.
I wonder, from your perspective, of a lot of kind of what this comes down to is going to be just customer education, like it was with SD-WAN, like it was with SASE and things like that, on in terms of what can I expect out of this on day one versus what do I expect out of this after it's been learning for years and years, right?
Yeah, that is part of the fun because you go from terms of like discussing things as roadmap into
Hmm.
now actually saying that the over time it's going to get better, right? And it's not like a feature that's changing. It's actually just based on the behavior of the network. The more outages that have occurred, the more that we've properly documented the resolution. And
Hmm.
the good news about Global Gig as an MSP is we've got this across multiple customer sets, right? So
Right.
we can take and infer the logic that from lesson learned from customer A, and we can infer that learning into the model for customer 2 and customer 3.
Mhm.
So I think we have quite a bit of an advantage. If you're an enterprise doing this alone, it would take a lot longer to train the
There's
model.
so much
But
more data to collect, right? When you're
yep,
not sharing
that's
data
right.
across different. I wonder too. That's again kind of looking from your two-sided platform towards the enterprise side. How about towards the service provider side? Are you, I know the carriers, of course, have been really excited about AI and automation. How are you working with them in terms of what they're learning and sharing it with you, and being able to sort of make this an iterative process from that direction?
Yeah, so a lot of this is being done mostly with the OEMs from the SD-WAN
Hmm.
appliances or the routers. Those are the conversations where we're getting mostly into AI. The carriers are, the big carriers are slow. They're
Hmm.
really slow. They talk a good game when it comes to it, but when we're working with them, it's actually they're pretty slow. But as long as they can expose to us something that, in the API, we'll be able to ingest it into our process, right? So
Yeah.
our conversations with them has been whatever you're using from an AI perspective, make sure that, the results are available in our APIs with you, because that's the only way we're going to be able to integrate with you on that in the future. Otherwise, it's too manual. Our objective is to get out of our network operations center ever having to pivot to a carrier portal. And when I say carriers, we've got hundreds of carriers globally that we work with. So it's not just working with three carriers where it's real easy to just keep their three portals open all the time. And we've got hundreds where I don't want anybody on the team ever having to integrate all the way from, from a support and management perspective, obviously, but also when we start talking about service orders and creation, we're taking the platform, the Orchestra platform, into where all orders and all provisioning steps are all done via API.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is where that's the whole industry has kind of been talking about this for the last several years, and that's the holy grail that we're making these little baby steps towards. And it can be frustrating to onlookers in a sense of like, okay, well, this is what we want the industry to look like from OSS, BSS standpoint, and ordering and
yes,
failures and all that kind of thing. That it's easy to envision what the future looks like, but it's really hard to take each of those individual steps towards that future. Especially, I assume in your case, you're not just dealing with what I would maybe call carriers, but also like ISPs, right? Which can be sort of hyper local even, right? So the problem on the one hand is that the big carriers can have trouble implementing change because there's such a large organization that has to move slowly. But there's also small ISPs that just don't have resources to even have. They might have one engineer who can set up the API with you and that's it, or something like that, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because the large carriers, while slow and change is slow, they are at least adhering to standards like MEF standards and things of that nature out there. But when you get to the local ISPs, you're lucky if they have an API at all.
Right.
And if they are thinking about an API, it's likely not following a standard. It isn't. So yeah, you're right. So it becomes a challenge. It's another challenge in itself.
Excellent. Well, so Jamie, I wanted to sort of wrap the discussion up. So first, let me just say we've been talking about like your Orchestra Insight platform and all of that. I wonder if you can give us some specific use cases, not naming customer names or anything necessarily like that, but specific use cases that you guys have run across at Globalgig and how those played out.
Yeah, maybe if I take a little step back and talk about Orchestra and then Orchestra Insight as a whole.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
If you imagine, whenever you are trying to source an SD-WAN, right, you have multiple things that you're looking at. You have to look at the connectivity requirements. Which OEM am I going to choose? Which is the best SD-WAN platform for me? Am I going to do a cloud firewall solution like a full SASE, or am I going to do local firewalls? I mean, all of those things. But imagine going into Orchestra and you you have this ability to build that concept, right? So you take it from a conceptual, like, hey, I want to build an SD-WAN or I want to build a SASE. Okay, well, here's the platforms we support. Choose and then what are the speeds and feeds? So what is the HA model for each location that we've uploaded in the system, and what are the speeds and capacities, or how many users at the site? We can build automatically, bill of materials for all of the equipment that's required to be able to satisfy the network design. And then it just drives, you see it from a conceptual, from a CPQ, which is configure price quote perspective, and it moves into an order process where the customer says, you know what, that is what I want, and I do agree with the pricing. So they they approve that SOF, that service order form, and it moves into a state where API integration to a contract management platform that sends them the right addendums, the contract pack, they execute, and then it drives into a workflow from provisioning. And you see all these devices that you designed, and it evolves into a network diagram, right? A global geographic map of your sites with with these components that are on the map, and these components are consolidated into a service, a single business service for each of those locations. And as the components come up, they turn green, and then you get an icon that demonstrates the holistic view of your platform. So you see availability in the middle, because that's what your site availability SLA that you're buying from Globalgig. You see circuit 1, circuit 2, CPE 1, CPE 2, out of band management device that we include with our managed services. You see all of this holistically at that site turn green, and now you have an active service, and you just rinse and repeat and roll that through your entire network.
Mm-hmm.
You've been converted to SD-WAN. Now, this doesn't have to be from start to finish, and all the components didn't have to come from Globalgig. This could have been as a onboarding exercise of, hey, I already have circuits and they're in term, or I already have an SD-WAN and it's in term. So we're going to bring it into your management tool. So you can bring it in that way as well, not just from a service. But then you have that holistic view that I've got my assets, I've got my billable components, I've got the ticketing platform. Every site that I see in the tool, I can see the status, and I can see if there's a proactive ticket created against it. So that's really the goal of transformation, is to get. It doesn't matter. You mentioned earlier, you said the orchestrator of orchestrators, right? And I thought about this too, and I said, okay, so I'm a monitor of managers. Well, mom's taken, that's not really a good acronym.
Yeah.
I'm a monitor of orchestrators. Moo, yeah, it's not a very good one, but really to bring that in, it's really what the vision was. Is how do I build a solution builder, and then convert that all the way from ideation into a life cycle, and then document the process of the deployment all the way through. I mean, visualize the workflow and process all the way through, and then monitor and manage throughout the life cycle of the contract, and then all the way through renewal. And that's our goal too, right? Is like to also not just transform this network and simplify the management of it, but to also manage the life cycle of the equipment, the licensing, the underlays, and continuously, plan ahead. Capacity planning is something else we do with AI, right? With our tool, is we see utilization going up, then we automatically let the customer know that it's time to upgrade the circuit, or bring in a third circuit, or whatever it is. We make those recommendations to the platform. So use cases, I think, are where customers are. They've got a TIMS provider because they've got network sprawl globally. They're global. They've got 50 sites. They've got out of those 50 sites, they've got 40 different ISPs they're working with. They've got an SD-WAN, or they're either converting to their first SD-WAN, or they're migrating off of their first SD-WAN because it wasn't the right choice. And we help them with that conversation. What's the best platform for you? Ours, because we don't own a global fiber network. It's not cloud gateway approach. It's very independent. Bring all the underlay connectivity you can, whether it's MPLS, DIA, broadband, wireless, fixed wireless, Starlink. We work with all of those. We integrate them into the solution. We roll it out to the customer, and what they ultimately get is they can get rid of their TIMS, because all their telecom is managed through the platform now.
Right.
They can get rid of their SolarWinds or their monitoring tools, because it's all monitored, and we can even extend to monitor their LAN components, their IP cameras. I mean, the system allows for that.
On the other side. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if we aren't in the workflow for supporting it, they can add it and visualize it in our platform as part of that site, that holistic site. So, to get them into this tool to where they can actually just see and manage and then have workflows on the back end that just that make life easier for everybody. So that's the vision. That's the use case. And that's where we've seen a lot of success.
And to highlight a couple of things there, so if I understand you correctly, you're basically saying you could do a rip and replace with you guys and get everything from the last 5G connection up, or you could come with your own network, your own SD-WAN already in place, and then get this sort of monitoring of the orchestration and all that as well. So you'll work with a sort of a wide spectrum of customers in that sense.
Yeah. So, we have a supported set of platforms that we'll bring in to the platform. But the roadmap will be any platform, as long as it accepts SNMP, ping,
Right.
and we know that those workflows are not going to be, but the reason that we have a supported set of OEMs today is because, our network operations center is taking a co-managed approach to it. So we have to have expertise in those platforms. But as the tool evolves, and if it's not in our supported wheelhouse, but the customer wants to use us from a monitoring and management or a monitoring perspective, but they want the workflow to integrate with their ticketing tool, we can do that too. So, that's the vision. But we like to look at it as, hey, come on, let us show you how we're doing it better. And then as your circuits come up to term, why don't you buy from us? Because it'll be easier. We'll support them better. We'll reduce your costs because, we don't need an LOA for those circuits to manage them. And then, when you're coming up for a hardware refresh, do you want to talk about, device as a service, so that we can enhance the network?
Yeah.
And do we want to talk about, out of band management capability? So yeah, obviously to bring them into our platform so that they can get a better experience for themselves, but also, to get them to buy into more of the Globalgig value story.
Yeah. So, I'll definitely say first on this sort of SD-WAN OEM kind of viewpoint, we do a survey about how folks are configuring their network and sourcing it and stuff like that. And there's a long tail of SD-WAN providers. Now we're mainly talking to kind of large multinationals, so it's different certainly if you're a small sort of domestic corporation, for example. But we have seen certainly in our data that the big 4 or 5 SD-WAN providers have the vast majority of the market anyway, right? So there's, with that long tail, those long tails serve pretty particular niches, I think, at this point, especially with all the M&A activity that's been in the SD-WAN space, certainly. And then, just the second thing I'll highlight that comes from our data that I think will be interesting for you guys to sort of hear, right, is that it varies a lot depending on the size and sophistication of an enterprise's network team. But certainly one of the pain points that has come up in this transition away from your one-stop shop kind of MPLS environment is that it's really hard to manage local ISPs or even regional carriers or whatever from around the world in multiple languages, people at those sites that aren't IT people at all, and those kinds of things, right? So it's definitely a pain point that I think a lot of enterprises have been seeking to correct in terms of, we have to take advantage of local internet breakouts because of cloud adoption and the cost and all that sort of thing. But it's really hard to do that with buying from an ISP that only operates in a single country, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we're time to wrap up, but I always like to do this, Jamie. And you've done this kind of throughout, but to put a sort of final gloss on that. What do you see happening in the network management, orchestration, automation? Right, kind of glom all those terms together. How do you see things developing in the next couple of years? What should listeners, whether they're an enterprise side, whether you're from one of these vendors that we're talking about, whether you're from a carrier, et cetera, what do we want to expect to happen in this space in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think part of this, my first step was I had to stop looking for network monitoring tools to be able to solve my dilemma here, with this monitor of orchestrators, and it just wasn't working out. So I started to look for platforms that were more focused on automation and so automation platforms, or in order to do it, and then have a automation platform that also can ingest data from network sources, right, or from API sources. So it's a transformation. Going out there and buying or a SaaS monitoring tool, or a something that you deploy and manage on your site. None of them met our use case. They did a very poor job. of breaking from the device-centric model, right? So in order to move towards a service monitoring, because that's what we're building here. Every location is a service, right? It's the holistic aggregation of those components is a service, and that's what you need to monitor. So make sure that whatever you're doing, you are focused on service monitoring, and the service is defined as the sum of the components and the ability to put some workflow and some correlation related to those devices. So I like to think of it as an automation platform that also does monitoring. So so that's what we started, and that's what we've built with OI. So I think that that's really kind of the key piece there. You have to break your mindset of the device centric approach. Monitoring a bunch of devices individually just creates a lot of noise and a lot of wasted cycles. So
once again, that holistic, scaled back kind of vision rather than individual component granularity. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. All right, Jamie, as we're wrapping up, that's been really interesting. Thank you so much. How can listeners keep up with you, with Globalgig, all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our website, globalgig.com, is the first place, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm not social outside of those really. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really the only two places you can find me.
With LinkedIn, I know that it has its uses and it's good, and I certainly post there. It's like always another thing to add to the list, right? I'm on there as well, so it's I'll see you there. But yeah, absolutely.
You might actually go check your profile, Greg, because if you go into your privacy and data settings, they opted you into machine learning data collection without telling you.
That is a really good pro tip. So there we go. Something actionable on the Telegeography Explains the Internet podcast. Excellent. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jamie.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And we'll talk soon. Cheers. Thanks for listening. Telegeography Explains the Internet comes from the experts here at Telegeography. It's edited and produced by Jane Miller, and it's hosted by me, Greg Bryan. And I also wrote that theme song you're listening to right now. To learn more about our data, jump over to telegeography.com, and we'll see you on the internet.